Hello friends, how are you doing today? And today in this video we are going to talk about three main things. One is image, virtual machine and container. And also we are going to talk about how the deployment model, application deployment model evolved from a very legacy way of deployment to the modern way of deployment. Okay, let's start with image. Okay, image is a software bundle where it includes your application code, configuration file, software libraries, all those things. Suppose if you are a developer, you have a code bundle, code repository that includes configuration file and also the software libraries which are required for your application to run, right? And what is virtual machine or container? Virtual machine or container are nothing but your image with runtime. So you got your software static bundle with all your libraries and code, and it has to run somewhere, right? So without runtime it will not run. So your image with runtime is called a virtual machine or container. Okay, and let's see how the deployment model works. Okay, suppose if you go back at least 10-15 years back, and if you are in the development team, what you would have done, you would have written your code and committed to your code repository, and once the code is committed, you manually trigger a build, and you convert your code into EAR file or WAR file, right? And after getting the EAR or WAR file, you will give that to the software configuration management team. They will take that and deploy into a app server which is running on a physical server, either Windows OS or Linux OS, right? And later what happened, to get rid of this software configuration management team, an automated way of deployment came into picture. That is nothing but CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so what happened, once you commit the code in your code repository, the CI/CD pipeline will trigger the build, and it will automatically build your EAR or WAR file and deploy into the app server which is running on any physical server with any OS like Windows or Linux OS, right? There were like a slight improvement because we got rid of the software configuration management team or SCM team, and we brought in the CI/CD pipeline, right? Continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. And now the modern way of deployment is, when you build your code, you after committing into your code repository, you build an image. Okay, so what that image contains, as I said earlier, this software configuration files, your code and software libraries, and guest OS. Suppose if you want to run your application on Windows, it will include your guest OS of Windows, and if you're running on Linux, it will include your Linux OS. And once after building that image, you will put into the image repository, and here the CI/CD pipeline will come into picture again and take that image from your image repository and deploy into a virtual machine. Here it's not an app server, it will deploy into a virtual machine which is running on top of the hypervisor, which helps to build multiple virtual machines, and the hypervisor will be on top of your physical server. Okay, so what is the benefit of running this way? The virtual machines can be created multiple virtual machines. Like when you have a virtual machine of your software code, you can spin up multiple virtual machines so that you can run multiple instances of your application on a single physical server. So this is the benefit out of it, right? And later in the modern stage, what happened, we brought this container concept. So why the container concept came into picture? Because compared to virtual machine, containers are lightweighted. Okay, how it is lightweighted? So when you build a virtual machine out of your image, you include your guest OS. Okay, guest OS is a heavy component. So when you deploy your virtual machine on a physical server, deployment time is higher, and it will take time to deploy, and even to fix the problem when it arrives, it takes time, right? So to get rid of this guest OS which is bundling with your image, the container concept came into picture. Okay, so what happens in this container concept? It still uses your software static bundle, that is image, but when it builds the container, it never uses the guest OS. Instead of that, it uses host OS. So wherever you deploy your application, for example, if you are deploying your application on a Windows server, it will use Windows host OS, and when you try to deploy your application on a Linux physical server, it will use Linux OS. Okay, so in that way, it will be lightweight compared to the virtual machine model. So how this deployment model works? Once after committing your code, and you will build image out of it and put the image into the image repository, and the GitOps is another way of deploying into virtual the containers. Okay, so GitOps you can use to deploy your application into containers. So basically, when it gets deployed into the container, it will not use the guest OS because it is lightweighted. It uses the host OS, and concept wise, like you can spin up multiple containers, so you can run multiple instances of your application. So these are all the ways of deployments and how it evolved from the legacy ways to the modern ways. So to summarize, in olden days, what happened when you commit the code, you have to build a var file and give it to the software configuration management team, and they manually take and deploy on the application server which is running on a physical server, right? And later, instead of software configuration management team, we brought in the CI/CD pipeline. It's a automated way of build and deployment, but still you build your EAR or var file and deploy to your application server which is running on a physical server, and there you will have to run multiple application servers. It is costlier, so that's why we came to use this virtual machine concept, where you will build an image including guest OS, and you can run multiple virtual machines on a single physical server, so that you can get the high scalability and reliability of your application, right? And we learned that virtual machine is heavyweight because it includes guest OS. So because of that, the deployment time is higher, and later we learned the concept of containers, right, where it does not include any guest OS. It just uses the host OS, so that the containers are lightweighted and deployment time is quicker, and it's very effective, and scalability, reliability, resilience are fantastic. So this is the modern way of deploying an application in container. In the next video, we'll talk about the containerization and how container orchestration happens, right? Hope you might have got some idea about image, virtual machine, container, and the deployment model, how it evolved from the legacy days to the modern days. If you like this video, give a thumbs up and share this video to your friends so that they can also get some idea about all these technologies what we are talking here. Take care. Bye.